All right, it's Thursday, May 18th. Everyone, welcome to our May TMAC meeting. We've got a nice full house today. Thanks so much for coming. Let's go ahead and start with introductions. I'm Joy McMurray, TMAC Chair, and we'll just go around the table.
Phil Fillmore, City Council.
Cindy Jensen, Citizen. Lisa Johnson, Planning Commission.
Vern Kiesler, Provo City Engineering. Gordon Haight, Provo City Engineering.
TMAC member.
Nancy Black, TMAC member. Old Golding Development Services.
Jackie Brascio, Development Services. Beth Alligood, TMAC member.
David Day, Provo City Public Works Engineering.
Anson Tresher, Development Services.
Chad Weaver, Development Services. Kahan Shore, Public Works Engineering.
I'm Jeff McLaughlin from TMAC.
I'm Greg McFarland from TMAC.
Judy Johnson from Provo City Public Works Engineering.
And Provo City, great.
We're glad you're not from Orem today.
Thank you. First item on our agenda is to approve the minutes from our April meeting. I've read those. I move we approve them.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, excellent. Then I'm actually going to, next item is me. At our last meeting, we talked about how we have this 10-year-old bike master plan. What should we do with it? And we agreed that the best thing would be to appoint a subcommittee to go over that and recommend which sections should be integrated into the next version of the transportation master plan. And I invited TMAC members who are interested to contact me. I'm going to recommend after those conversations that we have Jeff, who's our vice chair on TMAC and who has already gone through it multiple times, and also Clancy, who is our most senior, longest serving member. We get him one more month and then it'll be 6 years, right, Clancy? Yeah. I've talked with both of them. They're willing and ready to do that job. Unless there's anyone else who is dying to be part of that subcommittee, I move that we let those two. Do I need who's my planning commission expert? Do we need a formal,
I would make a formal motion if you're forming a committee, but.
Okay.
Do you have any other people that are going to be on it or just a committee of two?
Unless, I guess I'm asking right now, any other TMAC members who would really like to be on it, now is your chance to say something.
Are there any non-TMAC
Yeah, that's what I was asking, like
Like
staff or anything else.
I'm going to recommend, since we only get Clancy for one more month, and this will be coming from TMAC, that they feel free to consult with, like Bike Walk Provo, and maybe give them a draft and say, write your thoughts and get it back to us. But I don't think at this stage it's needful that we bring in outside of TMAC. I think we've got two documents that are complete documents. We're merging them, and I feel confident. I personally feel confident that Jeff and Clancy are very well of the bike community and connected and can get their feedback.
So the goal then is to take what's in the huge bike document and then make sure that it's represented in some sort of addendum to the current transportation master plan.
Recommended for the
Okay.
Modification. I don't know if it's an addendum in 25 or.
for the
And I don't know that we are going to produce that addendum or whatever. We're just going to say, hey, these sections are not addressed and we think should be. There might be sections that don't need to be. Like, I think it has like.
Out of the 200 pages of the bike master plan, there are not many that need to go into the transportation.
I'd be willing to make a motion that encompasses that.
Okay.
I would make a motion that Clancy and Jeff, all of a sudden the name left me, work together to make a recommendation to city staff for what should be included in the transportation master plan from the old bike master plan. Does that say what you want it to say? Is that captured all?
I think so. Okay. I will second that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And I will say, as I have already talked with both Jeff and Clancy, but feel free to continue with the TMAC's charge to represent all users in a balanced and ideally friendly way as you make those recommendations. Thank you. I'm going to save item 4 until later in the meeting, because I think that discussion will actually go better after Vern's presentation. So let's go ahead and move to item 5. Welcome Jansen and Javin, TMAC attending regular. They will be presenting about the One Gateway plan for us.
All right, thank you. Well, it's my first time in TMAC, so we do have a little handout for, I know there would be quite this many.
So at least if the chamber number two has
Thank you.
Javin and I, we work for Development Services. We are creating, what was given to us by City Council to create a gateway standard, for there. So here's kind of the timeline of where we are in the plan. So, as I said, City Council made that motion for us to, have a gateway plan, back in 2021, and finally able to get around to it. So we have, as a staff, kind of discussed this internally, kind of have a format set. We have met with our technical working group twice to kind of get their feedback on some of the structure and what they would like to see in the plan. And so we've got that format set. So we're here at TMAC just because we have a couple of questions, and you can kind of see at the top of that little packet that I handed out. Those three questions are questions that we want you to consider as we kind of go through the rest of this presentation. So the general plan, which was passed earlier this year, outlines 12 gateways into Provo. And so on the screen, you can kind of see these are the 12 that we're dealing with. Those are the 12. So these, as we go through, so these are the three questions that we kind of want feedback from you as this committee. So as we start to develop these standards of these new areas, so question one, how do we get people to their destination safely when they're traversing the public right-of-ways? Okay. Should there be logical pathways between public right-of-ways and their destinations? And then should there be pathways between ADA stalls at the entrance of the store? Yeah.
One question. Before we get into that, can you help me understand what was the stated goal of the Gateways plan? What's the council's goal that they're trying to achieve with this broad overview? For Javin.
The objectives of what this is, as we discussed internally and as we move forward with this working group, is that we're kind of creating standards. We're going to create this booklet of standards that could be applied anywhere and everywhere throughout the city. But with that, we have 12 gateways that are all very different based on their context, location, and there's no one standard can be applied at that location. So we're going to basically create, here's everything you can do. The next step will be when we are applying these on a case-by-case scenario.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
So I'm struggling to see the link between the transportation site planning questions you have here
You'll see that.
and those gateways.
You'll see that subsequent slides.
Okay.
Yep.
So the council didn't say anything very general, like we want the gateway plan so that our gateways are welcoming or they're functional, or like did they give you any direction to start with?
That's a big part of it. They want us, basically we want our gateways, we want them to look nice, inviting. We have a lot of room of improvement we can do, and this is one layer of improvement that we can do.
Maybe this is a good point for me to editorialize, Javin. Speaking for the council, we had two objectives. And we were looking primarily at the major gateways, coming out of Provo Canyon, coming on to South University off the freeway into the mall area, State Street, the south, and West Center. Primary focus, West Center, in terms of first major focus. They're not very inviting, those gateway areas. We want to beautify them. We want to make a sense of welcome to a great city. We just got the Milliken Award for the third year as the nation's best performing city. Our gateways ought to reflect that. So to some extent, it's cosmetic. It's also a matter of traffic safety, of course. We want to make that work well. The third thing was to exploit our gateways in terms of tax revenue. It's retail establishments. If you notice, most cities, as you come into them, they're lined with businesses that, you know, people coming off the freeway want to access right away, whether it's gas, food, or shopping, or whatever. That's often the case. We're not talking about overly commercializing. We want them to be functional as well as a beautification effort.
Thank you. So, if I may for a second.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
There is some lead overlap from transportation into land use. So you're going to see a little bit of that today with this presentation. But we thought what we're presenting today, this is the appropriate body for the discussion.
Yeah, so you can go on to the next one. So as we started doing research into this and we were looking into that functionality of these areas and kind of redeveloping some of them, this safety issue we kind of became aware of. And so we've kind of looked, and you can see up here, so in Provo, up to this year, we've had over 100 incidents, motor-related incidents with either pedestrians or bicycles since the beginning of the year. And roughly 11% of those have been in parking lots or leaving private property going into public right-of-ways. And it's not just a Provo issue, so statewide, this comes from the Utah Department of Public Safety. They had almost 900 pedestrian crashes in 2021. And kind of the big statistic that jumps out is a very minor number, so it makes up about 0.5% of all those accidents, but in terms of fatalities, it makes up 50% of total fatalities. And so this is something that we kind of, as staff, kind of looked at, and this is where we kind of wanted TMAC to jump in, and what can we do to kind of, as we're developing these areas, what can we do to kind of make them safer?
Did you say 15% or 50?
15.
15%.
They make up 15% of all motor-related fatalities. So, and this is, and why that's diving again into the research, what we saw was a lot of these, and this is kind of, again, from the Department of Public Safety, kind of tells us what caused it from a driver perspective, what caused it from a pedestrian perspective, and then, interestingly, where those locations occurred. And a lot of these are in areas that, as we try to redevelop some of these gateways, we have an opportunity to kind of set some standards, some safety standards of what we can do. Now, most of the time, and this is something what they said is 49% of the time the pedestrian's not doing anything incorrectly. They are walking correctly across a crosswalk. And so that's kind of why we're here, is what can we do to kind of do something a little bit different.
So this will bleed over between our existing policies. We have a lot of policies that talk about gateways. They talk about transportation. The general plan does, 7 neighborhood plans do, several design corridors. We have several zones or additional standards that talk about safety and our gateways. So a lot of policy in place, but what are we doing with it? Why are we just creating policy and not using it? So now the Transportation Master Plan identifies different areas. On the left, you can see critical barrier crossings. On the right, you can see active transportation safety hotspots. All of the maps and figures you'll be seeing come from Chapter 5 of the Active Transportation chapter of the Transportation Master Plan. And I've highlighted on the left where so all of those arrows are technically gateways into the city that we have right now. So with the purple is our core, the blue is our citywide for our AT network. We don't have any gateways that use the neighborhood one, but I do want to highlight just a couple of things of what we say in our plans right now. University Parkway.
Right, so let me ask you a question. Can you clarify, since we have several new members, what a critical barrier crossing means?
I'll defer that to Public Works.
I'll mention this. So I did that 2 years ago.
Really
So
clear.
I-15 is major arterials are barriers, railroad rights of way are barriers, canals are barriers. Large private property owners could be considered a barrier. The river is a barrier. All these things that kind of inhibit the free flow of transportation can be classified as a barrier.
Transportation in any form.
Yes.
But these are specifically for active
This
transportation.
one is identified as active transportation.
So that would be bikes and pedestrians.
Yes, and micromobility.
Awesome. So at University Parkway, where Provo Orm is, I mean, we have a lot of high speeds, hazardous environment. It's a major barrier if you're a pedestrian, if you're on foot. But we do say in the plan, the key is to improve the connections between this area is between the side paths and the surrounding neighborhoods and crossings at University Parkway. Special effort should be made to create safe and convenient environments, crossings, and between University Parkway to the UVX station. We don't want Lisa jumping and running across. She gave us instead. So
I'll never be forgotten for that.
So, and then University Avenue, down at the bottom from I-15, we recognize that, you know, we have regional traffic coming through here. We have a lot of capacity issues with that, but there should be a balance between walking, bicycle, and transit in this area. And it says, in addition, special effort should be made to create safe and convenient environment crossings, connections around University Avenue, UVX stations. So at the bottom, there's a table that shows some of these tools. As I'm going through a few of these, it may list some of these tools, but those tools could be expanded upon more. So those are actually some questions I have for you, is if you think additional tools might be useful within some of these areas. And this is part of your packet. University Avenue, coming out of the mouth of the canyon, it just says that several improvements to improve connectivity to the surrounding neighborhoods should occur there. And at Center Street and I-15, obviously I-15 is a huge barrier, has a great purpose, but has a barrier. We also have the barrier of the railroad tracks. There's no high quality pedestrian route for cyclists to cross that area. I can remember when the Provo Parkway Trail was closed and how much that is a huge asset to the city, first of all, and that is a great connection that we have. But without that, crossing at Center Street is not fun or pleasant.
Or livable, survivable.
Huh?
Yeah.
Like, the Center Street is not to be used for active transportation.
You're talking about at the freeway intersection.
Yeah, UDOT messed that up so badly, and I want to underline that every time I can. It is a terribly designed interchange.
Let's definitely put that in the record.
Yeah. Anybody at UDOT who will listen.
Do we need a motion for that?
No.
But that's the thing, yes, the river trail does capture a lot of the active transportation, but when that barrier was closed, where do you go? You have 8th North and Center Street. There's not a lot of connections, and Center Street's not a great connection for active transportation to connect to between the neighborhoods.
Yeah.
You have the Parkway Trail, Center Street.
Well, but that's what I'm saying, is that when they designed the interchange, they thought the thought was designing it was, that is not active transportation, period. It was the river trail and then 600 South that were supposed to be to get past I-15 from east to west.
Sure.
But what Javin's saying is that was closed, so we saw how critical it was to have that be functional.
And it's just identifying in here that it's a barrier, and how can we make it better? So,
For active transportation.
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
It's not my department, that's a different department. So, South State Street, it says, you know, we have a great multi-use path on the east side of State Street. We have more of that expanding, I think, coming up soon, if not already happening, or something. A section that's missing between there. But there's still improvements that we could do down there. Lakeview Parkway, if you're going east from I-15 on a bike, that's not pleasant.
Hey, I had a thought about that. There is a path that is a pedestrian path that goes from the Novell campus. It goes around and under the overpass, kind of underneath the Home Depot, and then comes back around on the north side of Lakeview Parkway. I think that would function to meet this need, but what I know as a biker is that I've never noticed it before. And so I think signage would be a solution in that one particular situation. Because the infrastructure exists, we just need to get people to it.
That's exactly right.
Feels like a rumor.
Yeah, like I've never actually tried it, but I've seen it from both sides. We were looking at it very closely last time we got off the freeway.
That is exactly right.
Yeah.
Can you access it again from the west side? Because I know when they were doing development in that area, they closed off access to pedestrians for a while.
You should be able to get into it. It's just tricky because it puts you out on the northwest corner of that intersection where the interchange is, and so you have to then become a pedestrian to go across Lakeview Parkway so that you can then get on the multi-use pathway on the south side of the road.
So, I mean, bringing these things to light, if I didn't work with the city, I have no idea about that place at all. So how can we, as we're working on revising, incorporating the bike master plan into the TMAC plan, all of these things are things to think about as we're moving forward.
Well, there's wayfinding methods and those go in with the gateways, right? So that's just one of those things that could be tucked into the wayfinding list and be paid for, and you're done. It just needs to be visible so that less of us are riding our bikes across the freeway.
Yeah.
Because it's easier.
Yes. All right. It does touches base slightly on Geneva Road. There's not much biking and pedestrian sidewalks on the north side up by Orem. I think that's north-south.
That's a state thing.
And yeah, and most, and to that point, a lot of these roads, a lot of our entry points are all UDOT jurisdiction. UDOT was part of this discussion. They've been informed of all of our discussions with our working group. So yes, that is a big part.
Sorry, I've talked with the state and UTA multiple times about Geneva.
So fun.
Yeah.
All right, so this map is just showing, I think I did talk most about this, but critical tools that we could use for our, at these locations when we're talking active transportation. And I think I got ahead of myself slightly, but basically it's just saying that these are tools we could use at these locations. So if you as a committee think that some of these tools we should add more at certain locations, please let us know. You and our email is at the very end of this presentation. We could pick some, but I mean, I would love some input on what tools you think would be best suited at certain locations.
Yeah, I'm curious how this Gateway's active transportation, like attention getting or wayfind or what, like I think all these tools would be useful here. That's good. What I wonder is, does making better signage at Lakeview Parkway and I-15 for a few cyclists take away attention from the network building aspects of the active transportation plan and the transportation master plan? Like there's a desire, I think, among the community and among the previous documents of this council to focus on filling in holes in networks inside Provo. And I wonder if we're spending our attention and our resources kind of honestly on the periphery. And like some of these are critical barriers, as you've pointed out, but I also, is it because there's finally attention being paid to them so we can get resources addressed to them? Like what, like this kind of, this discussion is not the same discussion we've been having is my question.
Yes, and I acknowledge that. It is not a normal discussion, but if we want to improve our active transportation routes to get into these places that may have shopping and everything else, once you get there, how do you get across the parking lot safety? How do you want to make sure that you get there in a safe manner? Because our code does not have great parking lot design standards.
But we're not talking about parking lots here.
We're going to get there. Okay. So we have all these things going on at the city. We're doing all these improvements at the city for active transportation. But the last point of how do you get there safely is still important, maybe more in the planning world, but I can see how the overlap is. If you're riding your bike down the street and you want to get to East Bay, and then you have to go through the entire.
No, I think it's critical. I agree with that. But the parking lots in East Bay and access to those parking lots are not the same thing as the gateway of I-15 onto University Avenue there.
Well, and part of this is the gateway is, even though there's those points, there might be a segment of that roadway at University Avenue that may have some additional standards in place for that.
Okay.
It's not gonna be specifically at that pinpoint location.
So
Well,
it's kind of like the quarter mile that we're doing for station area plans.
Not exactly, but it could be, so with our design corridors, those could be, right now, they're as small as 4 blocks, they could be as long as 25 blocks in length. So we're going to take the tools from this plan and apply it using design corridors in the end to have that other layer of zoning within these areas.
Like an overlay.
In essence.
Okay, Javin, forgive me. I feel like I'm a little slow in following this discussion today. I know there's more that we're going to get to, but based on what I'm understanding so far, I think I would have to take these one at a time with the issues you brought up. Like with safety, there was one of the gateways we talked about that had a safety issue, even though you started by talking about safety and parking, but then I'm like, how does that go with the gateways? And then talking about the connectivity or like active transportation at gateways, I would need to look at like almost gateways overlaid with our active transportation network, and maybe that's there, but like, is that gateway important to the network of active transportation, or is like how I'd have to look at them one at a time to say, how does it work with our network? Do we need to do modifications there or not based on each individual case? So I'm having a hard time making general statements when there's a lot we're talking about here.
I think I can help you with that, because we did prioritize those 12 gateways in the technical working group, because that's a lot.
Yeah.
And where do we want to put our, where do you want to start?
Well,
and so with that might give some guidance on maybe more attention should be given to maybe some of these locations, looking at the active transportation network more than others.
I mean, my sense is that, yes, Provo City should pay attention and require developers to pay attention to people walking in from the street, in addition to the people parking in the parking lot.
absolutely.
But I still don't see how that's tied to this gateways thing, unless we say, okay, East Bay is going to be a focus area. We're really going to make developers do this, whereas we haven't really made them do that to this point. And is that the discussion here?
I think.
Do I keep interrupting you? I get the point.
No, I'm pretty sure, we're looking at he's pointing out specific gateways and everything, but I think the overall discussion is setting standards for these gateways. It's not, this is what we're gonna do here, it's what do we do here that can apply to the rest of the city, and what kind of standards do we want for safety features as the gateways are developing? Because if you look at Geneva Road has 0 out there. But what standards are we setting at University in the Canyon that can be applied to Geneva Road as that's developing? So I think that's what the discussion as a whole is getting these standards set in place so that as we develop in the future, this is the core of what developers are expected to do at these places.
I think that's great, Beth. I mean, you can see how every gateway location is so interesting and really hard to, you can't just, it's not a perfect solution. There's no perfect box for this. Yeah. But if you want to improve and have more people, have people in these areas, whether they're on foot, scooter, bike, transit, car, all of these things are important in different levels of,
so getting the tool set of what they can use to develop the area.
Correct.
I guess my thought is that we should be doing this citywide.
Well, that's what.
There should be no development that goes in anywhere in the gateway or otherwise that doesn't consider some of these things.
Well, and maybe we didn't make it clear. So we have this opportunity to redevelop these specific gateways. Sure. And some, they have more potential than others. But what we're wanting to do is take these good principles and put them into these standards, and then use these standards in the future to then apply to additional corridors that we can then help with. So this is us getting really
discussion with specific examples. Does that make sense?
Well, I haven't seen very many specific examples.
Well, that's why.
We'll let you continue, and I bet it'll become more clear. Okay.
And just again, in the active transportation plan, we identified 3 walkable areas. But primarily the big issue within these areas it talks about in the plan is pedestrian safety. Actually, it talks about how it's really hard if you're a bicyclist when you are surrounded by a field of cars around you. In the mall, East Bay, at the mix, although that is improving, and then also in the Riverwood. So there are tools that we can use within the code right now, but do we need to add more of these tools in this toolbox to these areas to improve our gateways essentially?
That's a very specific question, right, that you have for us. That would
Yeah,
have to
so
be the next
essentially,
time. I mean, and the toolbox looks great, generally speaking, right?
Mhm. So within the TMP plan, some of these gateway locations, it calls out some things that you could do, but it has a whole other list of things that might be appropriate within that just for the core network or the citywide network. So my question really at hand is, do more of these tools, should they be applied within those locations that I was pointing out on the map, that are also part of your packet? And if you don't have an answer today, that's okay too. That's fine. Sure.
Well, I was just gonna say, you kind of mentioned it, this list of tools or toolbox of options is really like a menu. Not all of them are gonna apply to every scenario, and you would pick and choose the right application for the right area. Or maybe the correct solution for the wrong, for the problem that we're trying to solve. So it's not to apply everywhere. In fact, the list that we're showing from the Transportation Master Planner that Jevin and Jansen are showing is some of the best practices that were available in 2020. There are even more now that continue to be innovative, and Provo and UDOT have worked together on a couple of those innovations, and we're even improving on top of those types of innovations. So I think the next Transportation Master Plan update will include some of those things in the active transportation chapter.
And I think it can actually help in the end if we have in numerous policy documents saying that we want some improvements here. So if we need to go for funding it in the end, we can support it by all of these policy documents saying, well, it says that we need to do this, and that might be help in the end. So we're just gonna go through.
Oh, no, so to help you guys get kind of a thought of what we're meaning in some of these areas, we've identified some of these pedestrian connections, some places that do a good job and some places that kind of do a poor job. So we'll quickly kind of show these. So first, we have Lavelle Edwards Stadium. You can see that there are no pedestrian corridors from the stadium for any parking lot that you have. You can have the safety risk of a car being able to travel from one side to the other. There's no barriers in the way.
Within the parking lot.
Yeah, within the parking lot. Well, so this is, we'll have to have.
Granted, I think for game days, don't they close the street down?
We do.
Yeah, do close that street down.
And they actually use that parking lot for marching band practice as well.
I mean,
To be able to play.
at sporting events, there are more people out and about to see things because of, what can happen.
Yeah, you could put 1 pound.
Not much better, but they do at least funnel people out if they're riding tracks to the stadium safely without having to cross to the stadium parking lot.
So this is Farmington Station, and we can see that they do have a couple of these pedestrian connections. You can see in like the bottom right, they have that one leading from one side to the other, right? And they do some good things in this one. Again, you have that problem of where a car can go from the north side to the south side, cutting through the parking lot, potentially endangering citizens. I mean, if you're up in the north and you want to go south, you're just going to cut through the parking lot. Once you're inside, where all the main shops are, they do a great job of kind of funneling all the traffic in there.
How many guys have been there? Have somebody in there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice when you're in there, I think. Okay, so this is SoFi Stadium, California. This is a pretty brand new stadium. What I really liked with this one is if they're funneling people out this way, they never cross vehicles within the parking lot. They have a lot more pedestrian connections. Same with on the south side of the stadium, a lot more pedestrian connections as you're from your car, exiting or leaving your car out of that area. And the thing is, if you actually look at this on an aerial view, there's a stadium arena just directly north of it that's just a giant asphalt parking lot with no treatment like this at all.
So this is more local. This is the Starbucks that's north on University. And we can see this, they actually do a great job here. They have that pedestrian connection kind of coming all the way through the parking lot, so no need to walk through cars. They also have connections from the sidewalk into their business as well.
I have a question on that one. Are there any physical barriers in that one that would prevent the cars from pulling through and going out the other side? Like that sidewalk, that's the pedestrian walkway in between the parking
Like here,
stalls?
like-
Is it just paint or is it actually,
Raised median stuff.
is it? Do you know?
I don't know.
There's like
This is just no, there's no, there are barriers in front of the cars here.
So they can't
Concrete,
pull through.
concrete
They can't
curb.
pull through,
They have to back out, okay.
Yeah.
I'm just asking that not because I want to know specifically for this site, but because that would be something for us to consider if we like the idea of having pedestrian walkways through the parking lots, that we need to consider how we want to make them safer.
Right.
Instead of just when they're not being used, someone thinks it's a roadway.
Exactly. And last, this is Costco, and that one's Charge of the Strings. Which, what I like with this one is you can see four logical connections between the periphery and accessing the store. So if you do live in the area, you are going that way, you could get to the store without going through a parking lot in a safe manner.
Box of 200 corn dogs in the basket of.
In your saddlebag. In your
Bless
stroller.
your heart.
So we just have some questions for you. Dan?
Yeah, so we can see that there are a lot of tools, as Vern was saying. We have that giant tool, that tool chest. Some will work in some areas, some won't work in other areas. So a big question that we have, number one here, is based off of kind of our presentation or stuff that we've talked about. Should the city amend the parking lot standards to incorporate some of these safety improvements?
So I was looking for the answer. Again, this is some bleed over, but we could say in our standards document, we recommend that the city come back and amend this, so it's not, may not happen yet, but this could be part of a recommendation from this plan.
My first comment, and the first thing I've been thinking as I've been seeing all these beautiful pictures of parking lots, is we want our gateways to look like parking lots. And that's my initial impression. And as an active transportation user, there's almost no more great barrier to me to want to go to East Bay than the fact that I have to ride 2 minutes just to cross the parking lot.
I think we're looking at it backwards. I don't think that we're saying we want to bring people to our gateways like, I don't think we're trying to say we want you to only come to our gateways on a train or a bus or on foot or on a bike. I think we're saying if we want to attract more people to these areas of town and make them beautiful places, then we need to make sure that we have design standards in place so that when people do come, the different modes of transportation don't conflict. So it's more of we acknowledge that we're never going to have less people coming off of a freeway interchange down South University Avenue, but we also acknowledge that we've got train, active transportation, and alternative transportation nearby, and we want to make sure that when it arrives, that they can all coexist in harmony. Like, that's why we're looking at parking lots, not because we're hoping to have more parking lots, but so that we can put viable businesses in those vacant buildings and use the parking lots and draw people to them in ways that will be safe. Am I interpreting where we're meeting in the middle?
I can say something. There's parking lots all over the city that need this. Is there a specific reason we're joining the parking lot discussion with?
That's what I'm not.
I keep coming back to that. The worst parking lot in the city is the Macy's Target parking lot on Cougar and State Street. That parking lot is a nightmare, and that needs this kind of treatment more than anything in East Bay, which also needs it desperately.
Is it maybe because,
Is there a reason we're combining these things?
I'm wondering if it's because of redevelopment? Because we can't go in and tell Macy's and Target they have to fix their parking lot, but we can go into anyone who comes into the new Target at the mall and say, when you build and your plans are approved, you have to have these things. on the planning commission, we've looked at some plans for, people who've come in with redevelopment ideas for the mall. And the first questions we're asking is, okay, if you're going to put some mixed uses here, then how do the people get from the UVX stop or from the train station to the houses, to the mall? And so I feel like we're talking about it because it's more of a redevelopment idea that we can't
I agree totally,
retroactively change.
Lisa. I still don't see why that is in the same conversation as the gateways.
That's right. The redevelopment can happen outside of the gateway.
Okay.
Right? I mean, the mix used to be the worst parking lot in Provo.
Mm-hmm.
And it no longer will be. It might be a little bit better. And it got redeveloped, but I guess it's at a gateway, so maybe it's okay. Like,
I think your senior gateways are gonna get fixed mostly through redevelopment.
Yeah.
Not through the city funding them because the costs are so extraordinary, we need developers to do it. So if you look at, you know, State Street in the south, or any of those things, all those are gonna be done by private dollars. And right now, if all those gateways, and again, we have internal parking lots that have problems, we are only going to get dollars if they can build parking lots to attract cars and to really utilize their parking area. So I think what I'm hearing is that we need to, in that discussion, because that's how all the gateways are going to be fixed, is private dollars with a lot of parking lots, is don't let the parking lots over consume all the other active transportation, because you can watch this not in Provo, but up and down the Wasatch Front. Every gateway is how many parking stalls can you get in there, because every retail group, we're dealing with this with the downtown in Provo, we're dealing with it everywhere. But if we want to protect the gateways so that we're not just inviting to cars, but we're inviting to everybody, these kind of treatments need to be considered and implemented. So that's kind of my thought. So let's see if we can get it done for the gateways, and certainly as other redevelopment, these same ideas should spread across the city.
So to Greg and Clancy's concerns then, what if we talk about these and make them redevelopment standards?
Yes.
And then just keep those in mind with our goals for gateways, and then kill two birds with one stone, maybe?
I mean, that's what I think, like, if Smith's on Freedom is gonna redevelop, I would want it to use these same parking lot standards that we're talking about for East Bay. Right, and so I can't think of any non-gateway property in Provo that redevelops that I would not want to have these standards. So why is it a gateway conversation?
I guess because there's some overlap in certain areas, you know.
So today, I guess what I'm saying, if you were to fix the gateways, this would be a really prime opportunity to look at something. It incidentally helps the rest of the city, but right now, there's a lot of incident, there's going to be pressure soon to redevelop the gateway. And there's going to be pressure from the option of, well, I'm not coming unless I can get this much parking and this. Are we going to have standards in place that are going to be comfortable enough with the redevelopment money and not give away the farm and still have good stuff? And so I think this is going to be a harder conversation than we think. I've seen some things that I think could really help us. You know, they're talking about some more stores coming in. They want to have Christmas, Christmas type parking lot. They'll be 85% empty for all the year, and then, but they need it for those days during Thanksgiving to Christmas. And so I'm not asking you to judge. I'm just telling you that is important if we're going to get their dollars and get that redeveloped. But we don't
do it right the first time.
But we want to have some tools. The gateways are where this is going to show, whether we were able to do it or not. So I think it will be good. The gateways, the biggest problem they have are parking lots. And we are going to find that we have to accommodate cars, but we better do it in a way that's worthy of our third repeat of being best run city. So let's make that happen on the gateways. That's my thought.
Exactly, and maybe we're using this as an opportunity to, yes, redevelop the gateways, but then use these same standards, but then apply them throughout the city. We just have the opportunity, I would say, that there is overlap. We have to redevelop these. Let's establish some of these standards that we like, and then we can apply them throughout the rest of the city.
So like with current standards, do current standards accommodate for a safe pedestrian path in and out? So that would be, for me, that would be one of the first standards I would put in. If you are putting a parking lot in, if you're redeveloping an area, first thing you need to do is have a safe pedestrian walkway in and out of the parking lot to your store. I mean, how they do that could be varied, but like you were showing on some of those stadiums, they have like the meandering walkways or something, but a safe way that somebody could enter their property, get to the store, and leave their property without using it.
Because at the end of the day, a lot of these incidents don't get reported in parking lots. So even though we should get the numbers, it could be far higher.
Or how about the near incidents where
That's
they
it,
almost
yeah.
get hit?
That's true. So at the end of the day,
Are you looking for a formal vote from TMAC on these questions, or you want an informal?
I think informal.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay, so let's just take these one at a time then, right? Is that what you want us to do now, answer your question? Okay, should the city amend the parking lot standards to incorporate safety improvements?
Yes.
If so, should there be a logical pathway between the public right-of-way and the destination?
Yes. Citywide.
If so, should there be a more visible pathway between ADA stalls and the entrance of a store?
Yes.
Maybe that's
already required under
Yeah.
It's already required. It's already required, but you can enhance it by like the color treatment or other tools to make it more visible.
What if you just, make the required pathways, logical pathways between the public right-of-way and the destination pass through the ADA areas as well and kill two birds with one?
I think you
Logic,
You
right?
could do that, yeah.
based on the design in the parking lot.
Do we require that though?
Yeah,
I don't feel like that needs to be required by.
Yeah,
I
like
feel like
what does
federal
more
government's already
visible
done that.
mean, and does that,
So
I don't want to
example-
make it onerous for these new developments.
An example, if you're at University Place, over by Deseret Book and Cinemark area, that sidewalk treatment when you're crossing, that raised, intersection. It's a different table, thank you. It's a different color for the actual crosswalk part.
Yeah, and that gets into question 2 is, are there, what type of things could we do to make some of the treatments more visible? Is it raised? Could we use, we've seen different colors?
This is within parking lots.
Yeah, within parking lots.
You need to paint it so it looks 3D.
And then seeing that in some, that's,
Only-
Don't do
Yeah.
what they did at Macy's and Target. Just like speed bumps and meandering angles don't help.
you don't like the speed bumps, but.
No. They make me slow down, Davin.
I always appreciate
There you go.
I mean, to your point though, if you're in, just, west of the Walmart Norham, and there's that huge parking lot, when I'm driving through that, I just go on the side through the parking lot and not over the speed bumps, because
Yes,
they make you slow down.
yes.
So, it's a question too, are there additional treatments possible that you can add? Sure, I mean, Vern just told us there was a whole list that we haven't heard of lately since the last version. Yes, ask him and put those on the list of toolboxes, yes. You know, I don't know that we're gonna be your best people. I mean, I'm sure we could try to brainstorm some right now, but I'm sure there's lists of like possible treatments. And if you wanna bring us a list to look at, I guess we could, but
I mean, I think you could write your standards in a way that,
yeah, there's flexibility.
yeah, or just say, you know, there shouldn't be the ability to drive at high speed across an empty parking lot. Like just say, whatever, you know, this will be a criteria that the planning commission will use to judge the parking lot. And if you have long meandering paths without interruption, the planning commission will not approve it. And then you, as the developer, have freedom to choose, okay, do you want angle stalls, do you want curbs, do you want separated things, do you want walkways? Like, there can be room for freedom as long as you address this goal of, we don't want cars going through empty parking lots at 50 miles an hour.
As long as there's one parking lot in the city, we can teach kids how to drive in snow.
They're all.
That's what churches are for.
Not anymore, we have so many.
Okay, Lisa, go ahead.
I'm thinking, like, if you look at the Walmart in Provo, the neighborhood Walmart, what used to be there was a parking and pedestrian nightmare, and just the few things that they've done to make it so that it's not continuous make a huge difference. And I think some of the, Orem, like over where RC Willie used to be, some of those parking lots have also made their roads not come out everywhere and are less interconnected, so that you have to come around, and maybe In-N-Out Burgers line made that happen, but whatever it is. I feel like if we look at some of the places that we've seen it happen well, maybe we could step back and look at those and say, what did they do here that could be defined in 2 sentences of text? as a guideline standard without being overly specific.
I agree, and I think Gordon Lake got on the point too. A lot of these areas of our gateways are actually like 50-year-old buildings, and we could be having more and more redevelopment happening in these areas, and so trying to get ahead of the curve with that.
I appreciate that.
So,
Question 3, would you recommend reassessing priorities of the bicycle plan and the TMP to enhance the gateways?
so part of that was talking about like safety standards at intersections or other tools that I showed in there. If you would want to add more of those, just things to think about as you're working on the bicycle master plan. So that doesn't necessarily need to be answered today. I'm not expecting an answer, but just things to think about, Earl.
Yeah, one of the things I thought about when you said this, it'd be interesting to see streetway treatments done in parking lots. So you see in Salt Lake where they put the big green pathway for bikes, if those were done through the parking lot, so it's really clear. So you're using highway standards in parking lots. Because right now, parking lots seem to be exempt from that, and they are. But it might be nice to bring some of the more clear marking elements where you're going to do a share in a parking lot, do a share, show it. If you're going to do a pathway, make it.
Show us where you want the bikes and people to walk. So
If
that's
you're
a good
gonna have a
idea.
stop sign, make it MUTCD compliant.
How
Or it's like
paid for
30
those
feet
though?
off the top of the road.
I guess
Yeah.
talking about that. Put the walking signs, just an idea is look at maybe highway standards for the site.
That's a good idea. Who pays for the maintenance is my question. If we have people put these things in that raise crosswalks or then who goes in and says, that was a lovely thing when you put it in, but it's been 5 years and it's no longer serving its purpose because nobody, like, who enforces the maintenance? Because one thing for them to say, we put it in so we could get our permit. It's another thing for them to say, we still care about it. We still value pedestrian safety. We want to paint it so that it stays that way.
Pathways in the snow.
Yeah.
So our sidewalks, I mean, it's our right of way, but the owners, the residents, the private owners, the businesses, they gotta shovel. They gotta keep it clean. Same applies here. If you're putting signages, if you're putting crosswalks, if you're putting ADA ramps, then they have to maintain it. They have to restripe it. They have to repaint it.
So does that need to be codified in language of an ordinance, or is it just an assumption because it's their property?
Not assumption.
I really wish it was codified. Because I just do, I'm like Professor McFarland, I go to my local Smith store and I see they let the stripe, they repave their crack seal and they didn't come back and stripe the lanes. And how much more efficient would that be if that car didn't take up both lanes when trying to make a left turn, right? And it needs to be identified. It really does. And then Gordon was talking about the green paint for bike lanes. That's one of the new things that is allowed. And not only that, I heard Lisa say, hey, all the speed bump does is make me go around the parking lot where the other pedestrians are. What if we did something that is color, that is pavement color, just bright yellow or bright, design, flowers, lilies, whatever the case may be? It gets people's attention that, hey, I got to slow down here. And so I'm saying flexibility, right? I don't expect the Walmart pattern to change tomorrow where they're not going to have their little stop sign and their speed bumps in their lots. But what if we removed the speed bumps and had painted areas between the parking lot and the store frontage?
And with that, Walmart actually, and I'm going to pick Saratoga again, that's what they have their city code is what had Walmart do some things. And that's where I first saw some of this type of treatment within parking lots. And so it comes down to the city in the end on some of these things.
What did they do that you liked?
So they had every, I think it's for parking lots, 75,000 square feet or bigger. Then you have to have between every third row of cars, right, if there are, you'd have to have a logical connection going up, so that way you don't have people driving through. And as they enter, exit, an extra treatment as well. Park City Walmart also has some, it's Park City. But
It's for cars, not pedestrians. The every third row is for cars.
It's for pedestrians.
That's what I was saying, if we put into standards that they have to create pedestrian safety.
I always worry about having something in our code that requires them to do something that can be neglected after, like whether it's trees that they can let die, landscaping that they can neglect, or striping that we're saying, hey, this is better than speed bump, but now I can't see anything.
So the enforcement of that is challenging. And I believe they're responsible, and I believe the approval requires them to keep it the way it was initially said. The issue is 5 years down the road, those plans are well archived, and it's very difficult. So it's more of an enforcement issue. Who's going to go out and Public Works. And so we're going to go look at a private property owner, and this goes even to residential. They're supposed to keep 2 trees in the park strip. They get rid of both. So it's hard to manage that element, but I think if you get it done up front, you keep it fresh, you have a good management team, it can do well, but it's difficult.
We need to require them to put a sign up that says, if you are not pleased with the striping in this parking lot, please contact the owner.
But,
Or the city's enforcement, yeah, that.
Kevin, maybe like one more minute, and then we better move on.
Okay. To your point though, anyone can request a zone verification with any property in the city. And we'll go through planning and see how we legally recognize that. That includes legal parking spaces. I had one business who they could have had 20, but I could only identify 2 stalls. So their zone verification said 2. And I had a note on there saying you need to clearly demarcate them. And they got that done within like 24 hours. And they were striped, and then we could legally say we recognize this as 20 parking stalls.
What you're saying that I'm hearing Development Services is implemented is doing zoning, what you call them again, zoning, compliance, zoning verification. So we brought that over Utah County to Provo City many years ago. Zoning verification, not just for occupancy issues, but you're talking for other issues like site plan.
It legally lists how many parking spaces are on there, so.
But there's no complaint rate.
Yeah,
You don't have to notice it and have somebody bring it.
Well, that's not a complaint. That's usually when people are selling the property, they want to see how the city recognizes it. And so if they want to purchase a property and they think there's $100 and we only say 20, they're going to have an issue with that and they can get the issue fixed. So I'm going to jump quickly. So that's what we prepared.
Thank you. I hope some of that feedback was helpful.
Yeah.
If at some point you have a draft of a parking standards that gives ideas or has flexibility or changes you recommend, feel free to bring that to us, and we could give feedback on that. And gateways, I'm sure, will continue to be part of our conversations for the next for years. So thank you very much, both. Vern, let's get you some time to talk about the active transportation projects and what we've done and not done from the Transportation Master Plan.
Thanks, Joy. Last month, we talked about, at my first TMAC meeting, I said, what I want to do is a GIS exercise of taking the 50 projects that are in the Transportation Master Plan in the active transportation chapter and identify how many of those 50 projects have been completed, right?
Yeah.
It's always good to kind of go back and see what we're doing, how many we got to implement, that type of thing. Now, if you're an engineer, I'm sure Greg's already looked at this. What? That's 58. That's not 60. That's not 50, right? So that's the first thing engineers do: pull out the calculator, pull it up, start looking at this. Well, what we did is we have some projects. There are a total of 50 projects. The red are projects that have not been started yet or completed. The green are the ones that are complete. So if we want to maybe pull that a little higher and get in the heart of Provo, what we're seeing is we have 16 projects that have been completed. And some of those projects, and I'll use State Street as a good example, from Cougar Boulevard all the way down to 3rd South, that project has been completed for this active transportation requirement. But from that part north, it hasn't been. So I split that project into 2 projects. Independence Avenue is probably even a better example. We have it done up to the point where we haven't constructed the roadway. So once that roadway becomes connected, that project will be complete. So I divided a few of these into 2 to show that they're partial completions. So let's go back up a little bit and see that number one more time. We have 16 projects that have been completed in 3 years. So that's not awful. We have 42 additional projects that can be completed, okay? One of those will be completed very quickly. That's in early June. We're scheduled for pavement on Grandview Hill at 1550 West, and then we'll be restriping within a week after that. So that neighborhood bike lane will be complete. And that will be another project that we'll have completed. So a lot of times we talk about bike master plans and transportation master plans. We talk about all these active projects, but it's really about implementation. A lot of times we do a great job of planning. In fact, I think Provo does an awesome job of planning. When I was here 20 years ago, I was the only long-range planner. Now you have 4 of them, if I remember correctly over there, right, Javin and Jackson? So 4 long-range planners. They see that as important. I see it as important as well, but we need to implement projects. I get more joy out of seeing projects constructed and usable than I do in planning anymore. So I think what you need to see this, I told you I was going to bring it back to you. Next month, what I'm going to do is bring back another map that shows how it integrates with the existing system. Okay? So that way you can look at that and say, oh, that red line, if we just had that connected this much further, we would have the entire corridor done, or whatever the case may be. And then the following month, we're going to bring back, I'm getting ahead of myself here, I probably shouldn't make these promises. The next month, we're going to come back and we're going to show some of the active transportation that is done with the city only through Parks and Rec. So we're going to show some of the trails system, right? We got trails, and some of those trails are bike trails, some are walking trails, some are both, it's a multi-use path. So we want to get to that connectivity. I didn't want to cloud those two quite yet because we're talking about projects from the active transportation plan that was brought up last meeting.
Are some of these projects, just simply putting sidewalks in areas that don't have them? Or
Most
are
of
they bigger than that?
these are all on-street bike lanes.
Okay.
All bike facilities, I should say.
These are all bike lanes.
Yeah. And of course, some of the roadways aren't there, right? So for instance, Independence is not there.
Is that the red line
Yeah.
above the green section?
Yeah, that roadway is not built or constructed yet. There's a couple others that are in the same, on the west side, but in a year when we have our regional sports park, I think it's called, there'll be another opportunity, another roadway done that we can, we'll have striped bike lanes on. So those are the types of things that as infrastructure is built, we want to make sure that we're implementing these projects. One of the bigger ones is our asphalt overlay, right? That we use our UTF fund for. Extremely important. Once we have a in fact, I could point out a couple, but there are a couple gaps there because we don't want to go out and paint yet when we're going to do an overlay this year. And then once soon as we do the overlay, then we can restripe it.
Do you have a goal for when these projects will be complete? Is it in 2 years or?
Well, that's a good question.
If I recall, in this list of 60, and Clamps, you can't remember, there is no prioritization, there's no tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, like there are for the other capital improvement projects. There's no organization, it's just that
When they get to
when
it.
you get to it, this would be good, maybe when you're doing the road for some other reason, right?
So
Kind of
there were 50 projects and we did a tier 1 and a tier 2, 25 each.
Okay.
But we're actually doing some in tier 2 because that road deteriorated where we need to do the overlay, right?
It's opportunity-based.
It is, Clancy, and I don't want to pigeonhole our asphalt overlay program in any way, shape, or form, but I certainly want to take advantage of it, right? And so that's why sometimes they might be a little bit out of prioritization. The good news is that this is a 20-year plan, okay? The Transportation Master Plan is a 20-year plan, just like our general plan. Some might even say it's a little longer than that, right? But our Transportation Master Plan, we kind of like to update it about once every 5 years. Most cities update theirs once every 7 to 10. Since the implementation impact fees, they really need to be doing it every 5 to 7 years because there's laws associated with the use of that impact fee that you have to, by law, use it within a certain amount of time.
But whenever we do update the Transportation Master Plan, I think we should be more specific about prioritizing these active transportation projects, specifically so that the council has direction if they're willing or going to allocate budget to these, And also statewide, there's a lot more money going to trails projects. Like, there's a lot of funding allocated in this last legislative session. And if we've got it in our plans, this is our priority. We don't know how they're gonna allocate that, but if we've got it in our plans, we're a lot more likely to get money.
I like what Vern said. When you see these three phases of his, you're gonna see the gaps. And I think that will resonate with the council. It's not that you're doing a whole section, but these gaps. And it may take some curb and gutter and some side extra asphalt or some improvements to get those there. And so those will be capital projects. Those gaps aren't there because they're fun, because there's a money gap associated with it. We would have not left the gap on purpose.
Has the asphalt degradation because of all the snow removal this year been in your favor for these projects because more roads are being resurfaced faster than you thought they were? Or has it robbed Peter to pay Paul, you know?
There's a lot of pothole recovery. It didn't change the number of roads we're rehabbing. So.
But the reason I ask is because I was talking to Dave Day about this last week. The 700 East Center Street roundabout, that was a horrible place for bikes.
Yeah. No,
And
nice.
because it's been totally repaired, now it's a good place for bikes, pedestrians, and cars. So I just wondered if something like that was that was sped along because of the weather, if that means that some of these projects will be attacked sooner. That's what I thought.
But that was more of a maintenance safety hazard.
But it worked out for.
It wasn't striping or.
We got forced.
That's on our plan.
Slow everyone down to like 3 miles an hour.
But no,
Only the bikes though.
like Vern said, we're taking advantage of our maintenance program. As long as they're on the plan, we as staff, we're focused. So every time we do the maintenance plan each year, we're looking at really intently. When UDOT comes in, they're doing, their sections, we're saying, what does this need to be for the bicycle? So there's that aspect. We're not going to get these things done by just pure capital dollars. We have to be extremely creative, working with developers, working with our maintenance, working with UDOT, working on the MAG funding. But I was impressed when Vern went through, started looking at this, and started looking at the number of projects we were getting done. I was feeling, I had to stretch my arm out and pat myself on the back. So I really was, good job, council. But I'm just saying, a lot of plans sit on the shelf and you have 1% of the projects done. That's extremely typical in good, solid bureaucratic government. And I'm telling you, this is good.
3 years to be 1/3 of the way through that.
And so I think now that you emphasize and get priorities, it gets gooder. So
I certainly want to address Clancy's point of view on that. It is great to prioritize. We prioritize our capital improvements, but when money is diverted, and there's been just reasons for that with the airport and access to the airport, some of our other projects don't get done. If they don't get done, and I'll use Independence Avenue as an example, if it doesn't get done, then I can't put the bike lanes on it, right? And so it's great to prioritize, and it's great to update that every 5 to 7 years because priorities change. Things come in, economic development happens, right? Provo Airport happens, a regional park happens. Those are all positive things. And so it's healthy to reprioritize or redo your plan every 5 years with an update so we can take those things into consideration.
Then, Lisa, if I may, so back to your question that if this year's snow and the plowing kind of caused that intersection that you kind of referenced, if that was the reason behind why that road rehab happened there, specifically, no. There's no prioritization because when it comes to road rehab or maintenance program, there's 2 maps. We have the yearly map. So year 2023 already identified, these are the areas that we're going to focus. And then there's the 5-year map. And within these 5 years, we're going to do road rehab, overlay, mill, sidewalk maintenance on these locations. No specific priority. These are chosen based on the RSL, so road service life. And some of the places might be really bad, and you would assume, okay, most likely next year we're going to get to that. Not necessarily. we're gonna focus on the roads to prevent them from getting bad. The more roads get bad, the more expensive it gets, the more time we have to spend there. So it might be that a really bad road stays there for years up until we get to it, and then we'll still keep maintaining some of the other roads, preventing them from going into the bad side.
So that was just slated for repair this year anyway?
Yes,
Big
exactly.
roads cost less philosophy.
Yep. And then priority, no specific priority, development driven. Most of them are development driven. If a development is happening there, obviously we're going to use it as opportunity to go back to our TMP, implement whatever programs or plans we had for that section. The second will be if we have prioritized it in our 5-year or yearly map. And then third being, if council budgets funding to a specific project, again, that would be capital improvement project that we'll put on there. Lastly, I would mention some of the other things that we do, CDBG funding. So we kind of target some of these areas with CDBG funding. That's something that we don't know if we're going to get funding or not, but we keep applying every year for different locations, and as the funding gets approved, we'll use that to make some of the improvements, going back to our TMP and implementing the programs that we have on there.
Vern, is that everything you had for us?
Yes.
Any final?
I have a question. So some of these routes are UDOT roads, on identified on here. Does the city have to, match or contribute what the state's paying on some of these roads, or does it all come from UDOT funding for some of these improvements?
Sometimes they're called betterments and we have to pay. Other times it's on our plan and they have to do it. So I'm going to give you an example. State Street, where it's been done, was on our plan, right? And so they did those. Geneva Road, it's on our plan, but it's no longer on UDOT's plan. That's problematic. How do we address that? How do we prioritize that now, right? We really don't have a say. And so we have a say through our elected congressional, or our elected, representatives here in the state.
Does MAC help coordinate that?
Yeah, and then,
That does help coordinate that. But there's, when the financial assumptions occur, and at the end of the day, UDOT's going to put their resources for their prioritization.
So the bike trail, for example, on South State Street, the multi-use pathway there on the east side, since that's not actually in the roadway, was that funded entirely by Provo City, or did UDOT help pay for that?
I don't know the answer.
So they let us pay for those things, so we are responsible.
They let us, yes. I didn't know if it was
We volunteer
where it
for it.
falls in the right of way, like if it were a painted stripe in the road, would UDOT have
State,
taken
yeah,
care
so
of it?
Probably
state
$50 million.
statute says that everything behind the curb, the city gets to pay for and maintain, even if it's in UDOT right away.
Okay,
Everything curb and streetwise, UDOT takes care of. So
Okay.
it's kind of a,
and redevelopment would help defray those costs because they
Yes,
would
they
cover
have
the
to
city
take and
portion.
maintain that and build it. So it's a complicated equation, but yes, we're working on it.
Thank you, Vern. That's really encouraging. It was a higher number than I thought it was going to be, so that's fun. And
I have to be honest, I thought it was going to be single digits,
I was afraid it was going to be.
and it turned out.
So that's good, and we can look at it again next month in a different perspective in the network. So that'll be great. Our last agenda item today, I feel like we've kind of been building towards with our conversations about gateways and parking lots and active transportation projects. I just wanted to our goal, as we've been talking about the plan for the year, we did that survey and we had that excellent discussion last time about what are TMAC's priorities to actually help with some of the council's transportation priorities. And as a review, the first, almost universally, was the continuing quest to find the right balance between the needs of vehicular traffic on one hand and pedestrians and bicycles on the other hand. Second priority, the generally acknowledged need for an improved east-west connectivity in Provo. Third priority, the residential connectors and collectors, traffic calming measures such as Slate Canyon. We're hoping to get to these top three priorities over the rest of the year for TMAC. That's kind of the general direction we'll be going. Those are our priorities based on extensive discussion. So I wanted to introduce the first one today. I feel like the second and third priorities, thank you for having those up for us, Kahan.
Yeah.
Or C and G as they used to be labeled, those are a little more, obvious, something we can like dig into and say, let's talk about this, let's look at maps, let's talk about strategies. The first one, it's a continuing quest to find balance. That's harder to define and to get at. So my question for TMAC, we have a little bit of time today, but I'd really like you to ponder this over the next month and really get into it next time. What can we do as TMAC to help with that? I've been trying to rack my brain to brainstorm some possibilities. I talked with Clancy. I'd be very interested to hear your ideas as well. Some possibilities for us could be finally putting together a complete streets policy that has been backburnered for a long time. That would be one way to get at the balance and recommending that to council. We could get more specific. Where are areas in the city where balance is good and where we can learn from that? Where are areas where our balance is off and what do we learn from that? What can we do there? What are our guiding principles, right, for maintaining this balance, achieving this balance? How do we need to define those? Would that be a complete streets policy? Is it already in the transportation master plan somewhere that I can't find? So this is a really big one that I need help with from TMAC to say, how do we help the council do that? That's everyone's top priority, but that's a tough one. How do we start getting at that is my question. So now that we have like no time left and I've just thrown that out there, anyone burning to say something before we, okay, let's do Lisa and then Greg and then Clancy, you have a hand too, and maybe Bill. I don't know, we'll see how far we get.
I was also just gonna say, I feel like we've talked about that, and maybe letter D is just something that is a question we ask every time we talk about a project.
Maybe it's that
You know,
simple.
it's mostly like a screening question, like a triage question. How do we address this goal, this need for development in every conversation we have, instead of it actually being just one? Yeah, that was my thought.
Okay.
So my question is this is a tricky one, but what is balance? What does balance mean?
Yeah.
Does
We can
balance,
talk about funding, we can talk about
does balance mean I can drive safely from any point in the city to any other point in the city unencumbered by congestion? Because if that's true for automobiles, would balance mean that should be true for bicycles as well? Because it's not true for bicycles.
Not true for cars either.
Well, I mean, our congestion is really not very bad if you look at it
I agree.
in any objective measure.
What's
right?
balance?
Compared to Los Angeles.
It's true,
But
it's
good.
true.
But we get more complaints about congestion.
I know, and I'll talk to you about those. But like that's the question. Like what is like
What is balance?
what does it mean? Like the same level of service overall for all users? Does it mean safe travel overall for all users? Does it mean similar levels of investment? Does it mean similar levels of delay and annoyance? Does what is balance, and who defines what balance is? I'm really concerned by that. Because Provo has about 10 minutes of congestion a day.
I'll give you one quick definition. From the city council perspective, balance often equates to budget. We have many things we could do with a very finite budget. So,
Sure.
So how do we prioritize our funds and balance them out?
Yeah, and that's a good question.
So that people don't perceive it as disproportionate for one constituency than another.
Sure, so when the census says that 20% of our work trips happen by non-vehicle modes, does that mean we're spending 20% of our capital money on pedestrians and bicycles?
I think it'd be fascinating to look at that and say, okay, present to us, where are we spending our dollars? How much of that has gone to active transportation? And would we want to make a recommendation to the council to say, hey, you might want to consider saying 10% or some percentage, 20%, I don't know, goes to this. That's something TMAC could talk about and recommend and look at the data, definitely. Clancy, did you have?
I just, you mentioned the complete streets years and years happened, and all those people are gone now. So maybe it would work. I
don't know, and do we need it? I don't know.
Literally all those people are gone, so.
And I have no secret agenda or answer. Well, I think we should get at it.
The other idea I'll just throw out to think about, because it's a half-baked idea. We classify all of our roads like a neighborhood street, a collector, an arterial, etc. Like we have that classification for every road. What if we were to somehow classify every road based on the priority user for that street, and that somehow affected our plans for that street? Like, hey, this street, second east, The priority users on this street are
Right.
bicyclists. Center Street, the priority users on this street are pedestrians. Half baked idea, but the concept is if we identified what the priority is on each street, every road can't perfectly accommodate everyone. I mean, University Avenue through downtown is the only road that maybe almost accommodates everyone pretty well, including transit. So to me, to the balance question, we can't balance it perfectly, but if we can prioritize correctly on each specific street, I think that might be a
That's
solution.
an interesting idea, Clancy.
We
There's
could
another,
revolutionize
there's another,
transportation theory.
another element to balance, and that's safety, isn't it?
Mhm.
You know, we've had a lot of discussions past year about hotspots and how we allocate state funds, right? And so one of the high priorities has to be our hotspots and put money towards the high accident areas, right? Look at that, I would put another element on your list here, just possibly. Considerable interest in the council right now about a pedestrian mall concept on West Center. That to slow down the racehorse traffic on West Center to I-15.
that before.
And that was actually, that would be,
That's part of the
Center Street would be
east-west
item
connectivity.
4. If there was an item 4 out of our top 3, it would have been Center Street from our votes last time. I'm so glad, I meant to say that, Bill, thank you. So, and Center Street is the bonus for, especially if there's interest right now, then to some extent, the council's priorities dictate TMAC's priorities. Is there something
That
specific?
also overlaps with the gateways too. It's an area of
Yeah.
redevelopment, it's an area that's being talked about with parking adjustments, it's an area with design standards and pedestrian and bike issues. So we've talked about it a lot in many different ways.
Okay.
I think Center Street fits in with that east-west connectivity question as well.
Okay. So can I ask that TMAC become prepared to discuss next month how we help the city council with item D, which I'm now going to call item 1, that quest for balance, and what could we actually do to help them, and what kind of questions can we ask, and or things could we produce? Yes. Good. Okay. And so we'll have one last chance to contribute. Bring something good. Also, one of the jobs of TMAC, this isn't on our agenda. Anyone else want to say anything about that? Yeah.
There was
Yeah.
a complete streets policy or something that was added to the folder where you find the transportation
Oh.
master plan on the city website. There is
There
something
is there.
from 2021, signed Dave Decker and Wayne Parker at the bottom. So I don't know if that's anything of a start of what we're looking at, but there's something out there that says complete streets at the top. It has their signatures at the bottom.
Well, we worked on complete streets on a neighborhood level 5 years ago. I mean, I sat down with Bill Burrow.
I can't remember.
I was gonna say, this is something we talked as neighborhoods when we were talking about West Side Development Plan. We talked about complete street policies in the West Side Development Plan. That was 7, 8 years ago.
Does Provo already kind of have that with collector streets when they're built? That they will have pedestrians and bicyclists and vehicles?
Well, because like with Bill, we talked about the width of the roadway, everything, what that means, what right-of-way is, how, I mean, we went through all of that during the West Side Development, so.
Kayhan, did you have a comment then?
Yeah, so I guess back to item D, I mean,
Yeah.
interesting, and thank you, Mr. Fillmore, that you mentioned to council, maybe balance means the budget. Maybe the funding portion of it or the safety portion of it. And if that's the case, then I guess, why don't we just look for something similar to what UDOT has for their projects? They have a specific amount, which I believe it's 3/4 quarter, it's a 3/4 or 0.75% of the total project amount that will be kind of dedicated towards the aesthetics, right? So maybe there got to be a specific percentage that will be kind of dedicated towards safety, as well as, and I'm going to go back to the gateways conversation. If we want our gateways to be more attractive, then maybe again, a similar amount has to be dedicated towards making it attractive. And these don't have to be things that we do normally. Like, okay, for just the statics portion of it, we're going to dedicate the specific balance or the specific amount for every single development project. We'll require them, the developers, okay, this will be used for aesthetics. This will be used for your balance. I don't know, so something, because,
There are probably some helpful criteria on a UDOT level, but just a little insight on realpolitik. The UDOT's priorities oftentimes are a large function of where the leadership in the House and Senate reside.
Go through his experience this past year.
You mean the federal?
No, I'm not, state legislator.
But there also may be some things that we can do on a regular basis that don't necessarily need to have a delineated percentage of funds going to them, because for one project, it might be more affordable than another. But the ideas of like seeing how they break it up would be useful as a starting
It's
place.
worth looking at.
yeah, because when it comes to capital improvement projects, right, we have wish items. Or like, we could always do such and such and such and such, but we don't have funding for it.
One of the issues is always how can we get the biggest bang for our buck, right? And so some projects are really attractive, but they're disproportionately expensive. You've got others that have significant benefit, cost a lot less. And so balance is a multifaceted concept, isn't it?
Okay, thank you for that feedback. Let's go ahead, is there anything else? I think we've got all our agenda items. Let's go ahead and adjourn for today. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here.
Enjoy it.
Thanks, John.
So what have you done?
Laverne, Lakeshore Drive coming up to Provo High School.